and welcome to Old Timey Crimey Presents The Murders on Lover's Lane. I am Christy.
And I am Amber.
And we are going to tell you about the next murders, plural, in the Lover's Lane series in just a moment. Don't forget, you can always come over to our Patreon. That is patreon.com/oldtimeycrimey. And over there, you can not only get bonus episodes where Amber and I talk about crimes we dig up from the old newspapers and then sometimes just wacky other stuff, you know.
We break the rules on that side.
We really do. Sometimes we jump a little bit forward more in the timeline and it's not as old-timey. Sometimes we go really far back. Sometimes I do, like, I think one time it was weird ways that people have died.
Yes, that was fun.
And people that died by their own inventions was a fun one. I'll just, like, go through those Wikipedia lists and then just flesh them out with all the details I can find of the weird little cases there. So yes, come on over. You get that and early access to the episodes here, so that is obviously limited time only because that's just these Lover's Lane mini-series episodes while they're running. Once we get back to normal, it'll just be regular episodes and there won't be any more early access. So just letting you know, come on over there. You can do a 7-day free trial and you can also sample the episodes, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So give us a listen. Link is in the show notes, of course. All right, so we are heading all the way to Colorado, actually. Colorado, definitely Colorado. To Denver for this particular case in the Lover's Lane series. It's got a few differences, I think, but a few similarities that make it so we can't really cut it off from the rest of the group.
Yeah, and I found one article linking it to the last case that we talked about as well, that they really thought it was the same person.
And I can understand why they would. There are enough similarities that you do wonder. But it's a strange case, I think. And so, yes, we are in Colorado, and it's the summertime still. We're very much summertime. We're very much enjoying this nice, sultry August night. And maybe a man boards a bus in Englewood. And maybe the bus drops him off at Federal Boulevard in Denver. And then the bus goes on its merry way, and the man stalks down Federal Boulevard as the warm summer air parts before him. Maybe a few hours before that, at a boarding house in that same city, there is a young man named Fred Funkner, whose name will never not be a thing of wonder to me.
See, I love it. And I actually had in my notes Funker, because a lot of the articles I found called him Funker. And so it's really fun for me to say Funker.
Yeah, Funker. I also saw in a couple places Faulkner.
Well, it's forever Funker.
I like Funkner. The tongue does not trip easily over it. And that's, I think, why I like it. So young Fred Funkner, he is 19. He's lived in Denver for a few years, just about 2. He relocated from Cub Creek, Nebraska, to work as a carpenter. His sister actually had married and then moved out here to Denver, so he just kind of followed where she went. And he kind of had an unexpected evening ahead of him. It was a Sunday. His landlady had a few relatives over, young ladies. They were sisters. Marie McCormick, who was 17, and Julia Stearns, who was 32. The newspapers constantly said 25, but I'm here to tell you, 32. Oh, did you hear differently? You have a look.
Well, yeah, I had different ages, but still, that is a large gap between siblings.
It is. They come from a very large family, and it is very Irish.
Ah, okay. It all makes sense now.
Yeah,
okay.
Their parents came over from Ireland, and just so you know that they were the lucky ones who made it to adulthood in that family. Or, well,
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was, looking through the list of the siblings there, the majority did not make it to adulthood. So yes, Irish, both of her parents. And so, yes, they're sisters. They're working for a tailoring shop. Julia has a little bit of a history. She's been widowed and divorced, actually.
Oh.
Yes, the newspapers just said divorced, but then when I was able to look at her history when she's in the 1920 census, she's listed as living with her family, but widowed. And she has a different last name, Carter.
Oh. She's had a hell of a life already.
She's had a really interesting life, yeah. And at that point in time, she was working as a telephone operator, actually. Rounding out the group, we have Carl Perry. He's 25. Did you find very much on Carl Perry?
I did not. Can I tell you how irritated I am with how common a name Carl Perry seemed to be?
I know. I even tried initials. I tried Charles Perry in a few places. But even that, that's even more common, as you can imagine. And, it's strange that he's the one who disappears, but he also has such a common name. And I had a hard time tracking the sisters down as well. It took me a little while to finally get them.
Yeah, it was, damn it, Carl?
Yeah.
Damn it, Carl.
Because just to show you how difficult it can be sometimes, Marie went, her first name was actually Bridget.
Oh.
So that's why
I couldn't find her.
Exactly. Yep, there you go. It's that name thing again.
Yeah, because they would just constantly go by, this is the name I'm going to go by, this is the name the papers are going to report, and then they're going to report the wrong age, so it makes it even more difficult to track them down.
Exactly, yes. As long as you have almost no information, and the information that you do have might not even be right.
Yeah, it makes for a tough find.
It does. And then you also have the fact that these are families that don't have a lot of roots here in the country. Again, like I said, the McCormick family, both parents Irish-born. The Funkner family, both parents Russian-born. So everybody here has emigrated. A lot of them parents, these are first-generation Americans. What?
I didn't realize they were Russian, and as soon as you said that, I'm like, I bet they tried to make their last name Fucker, and they just weren't saying it right, and so that's how they ended up with that last name.
Of course, in your mind, it always comes down to some mischief, or attempted mischief.
That is not a Russian name. Like, come on.
I do remember seeing kind of a variation of what the name was, but I can't remember what it was. What the original one was on the documentation. But even I look at a lot of census records, and it's rare that the names are actually written down accurately.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
For my own last name, I've seen Boxster.
Yeah.
Boxster. My name usually gets written down correctly, but when it gets wrong, it sounds so silly. Mm-hmm. You just change one letter in that whole name, and it just turns really silly. So, yes, it's really amazing how many of our victims here have been children of immigrants. I don't think it's necessarily a Target thing. I think it speaks to the population of America at that time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because everybody was still coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not like everybody woke up one day and everyone's just here. No, like, people were coming over during this time. Lots and lots, boatloads.
Yeah. Entire, actual, literal boatloads. And you had, things going on, unrest in other countries that were sending people our way. You had, it's entirely possible that the Funkners were Jewish and might have, come over as a result of a pogrom or something like that.
Yeah.
You have, Ireland, some sort of, sectarian violence or a famine. I don't know the exact timing or what was going on in history. Or maybe they just felt like taking a trip and then, decided to stay longer. Who knows? Sometimes you extend your stay.
Maybe the dad had been kicked out of every pub, and so he decided to switch countries.
Yeah, he was like, oh, we got to start fresh now. So they're all at the boarding house, and the landlady is like, oh, well, I have all these nice young people here. Why don't I try and just put them all together, and they can go off and have fun like young people should. And so she suggests that they go out for a drive and maybe go, do something fun and summery. So they all go to an amusement park together. Now, I don't know what amusement park they went to. And actually, a very frustrating thing is that the Denver papers from this year, 1925, are not really available on any of the newspaper database sites. You can usually get up to like 1923 or 1924, which is really frustrating. I don't know why it's more frustrating, but it is. But you do have in other years, for instance, just to give you an example, Lakeside, Denver's Mile High Coney, where you can do dancing, skating, boating, music, life, action, fun,
Life,
thrilling rides, novel shows, shaded picnic grounds. Yeah, they just started throwing random nouns in there at some point.
Somebody yell purple.
Just like word association started happening. On a Saturday and Sunday, you had the Wrath of War, Lakeside's biggest spectacular success. You could have a sunset dinner on the balcony. There was rides, there's dancing lessons, bathing beach.
That actually sounds like fun, though.
It sounds pretty freaking nice. Hot and cold showers, women's lounging room, and fine aquatic equipment.
Does that mean pool noodles? I feel like that's pool noodles.
I want it to be like ski-doos.
Maybe.
Maybe goggles.
There you go. Have some goggles. It's our fine aquatic equipment.
Back before they knew how pink I spread. So yeah, that's an example of maybe what they might have done. Maybe they went and, walked on a boardwalk or did something somewhere. And so they go out, go about their night, have a nice time, and then they're heading back. They're driving back to the city on South Federal Boulevard in a roadster. Fred is driving. Julia is next to him. I don't know if this is like a 2 in the front, 2 in the back, kind of 4-seater, or where everybody's sitting as far as the other two, but somewhere in this car, Carl Perry and Marie McCormick are sitting together, and it seems like Marie is kind of sitting on his lap. So I don't know how the extra seat or seats were set up. I don't know if there was actually a seat for her and she chose his lap, or if that was her only option. So it could have just been a 3rd seat and no 4th seat. I don't know. But she's sitting on his lap. And then Carl tells us what happened. And
maybe it's just like a bench seat in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's like Fred, Julia, Carl, and then Marie sitting on Carl's lap.
That's entirely possible too. They could all be sitting on a bench seat in the front too. Yeah. And then it would make a lot of sense for her to be on his lap too, because I'm sure it's not wide enough for 4 people. It's probably a squeeze for 3.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm thinking, because if there was a back seat, it doesn't make sense that she would be on his lap unless... But, I mean, these are just, like, people that just met. Like, they're not friends. So it makes me really think that it's just a bench seat, and that's how you're squeezing in.
Yeah, basically. So we have Perry's description of what happened next in his own words. It was terrible. We never had a chance. We were riding along, joking and laughing. All of a sudden, out of the darkness, a man leaped on the running board and thrust a pistol through the side of the car. He had ordered us to drive down a little lane. We did as he directed. All the time, he kept cursing us. Finally, he told us to stop. Then he stepped from the running board and jerked open the door. "Give me your cash," he yelled. I had dropped what little money I had behind the cushion. We told him we were broke. A few words were said. I don't remember what. Suddenly, he jerked a second pistol from his belt. The youth broke down and was able to continue only after a few minutes. There were bright flashes of fire. 1, 2, 3. They seemed never to stop. I remember Marie gave a groan and slid out of the car door onto the road. I remember throwing up my arm to protect my face. Something stung me in the arm. There was a moan, and I knew Funkner was hit. When he slumped over the wheel, I jumped out of the car and ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was going for help. I saw a man running down the road. He was the man who held us up. I ran the other way. There was a house. I hammered at the door. There was a light, and a man opened the door. I told him they were all dead. He got some clothes and ran with me. When we got back to the car, his voice broke. They weren't there. We did what we could. We didn't have a chance. So that is, in his own words, the truly terrifying events that happened on what otherwise would have been a lovely evening.
And even scarier that it kind of sounds like he was running at the shooter for a second and then, like, turned tail and went the other direction.
Yeah, like he accidentally, just in his terror, picked a direction and ran, and it was the exact wrong one.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very terrifying. So there's another version of the story, not in his own words, that leaves out the burglary, the running board, and even the 2 guns entirely. It kind of has the shooting happening without warning. And there are some versions of the story where it seems like that's what's happening, and also that the shooting is happening like almost like a sniping, like from the road. But in Carl Perry's words, it seems like the shooter was actually right there.
Yeah, and like I did have one that he was on a motorcycle, and this seems like an action movie. So he's on a motorcycle and then jumps from the motorcycle to the running boards.
Okay, so you've got one with the motorcycle in it. Okay, I don't believe I had seen one with the motorcycle in it, which is interesting because we'll get to that. That motorcycle pops back up, and I was wondering where the hell it had come from to begin with.
Same. But I did find one, and this was actually like August 3rd, so this was like the very next day. This would have been from the Kenosha News.
Kenosha.
And it says, in a sensational holdup, the party was driving on a country road when the bandit came by on a motorcycle and jumped on the running board of the car. Yeah. So, action movie shit right there.
Yeah, it seriously is. It really is. We've had... Running boards are featuring very dramatically so far in this little mini-series. We had jumping on the running board after being, shot in the jaw to ask for help.
Yeah.
We have jumping on the running board to shoot. So, yeah.
And, like, think about how many cars actually have running boards that you could jump on nowadays. Just like the big trucks, because you need them to get in it.
Pretty much, yeah. There's you cannot have running board drama these days. They've took it away from us. They've taken it away.
Much less. It's still possible. You just got to go for the big trucks.
The woke mob.
The woke mob did it.
Took our running board drama. So, yes, he gives us all of this. The version, there's one version that does give us sort of an order of events. First, Fred Funkner, then Julia Stearns, then Marie, and finally Perry. Now, the ladies, it seems, they were dead long before help arrived. And then Funkner died on the way to the hospital. Carl was wounded, his right arm and his neck, although some accounts say the shoulder, but he was mobile. And it's really a toss-up. Did he go to a farmhouse? Did he go to a drugstore and call? It's amazing how these differences get mangled. And I swear sometimes if people don't know, if the reporters are writing these things and don't know, they just make it up. Or they have a wheel that they spin. When they're like, okay, where did he go for help? To the drugstore, to a farm, to a passing motorist, to Santa Claus.
I feel like it's Cabin in the Woods.
Yes, oh, there you go. Yeah,
They've got the whiteboard and they're just taking bets and they're like, what's it going to be this time? Chainsaw? All right, you got it.
Very much so, yes. So but there are some ranchers who get involved in help. Now, Carl said that the killer fled on foot across a field after the shooting. But then this motorcycle comes in that you had mentioned before. And the Denver riot squad, when they got on the scene, they, quote, gave chase to a motorcycle that was traveling south on the Morrison Road.
Yes, without lights, careening wildly over the roads, twisting around corners and curves to dodge the lights of the police car.
We are definitely having a real live police chase here, people.
Do you know how hard it would be to, one, drive like that on a motorcycle, but then with no lights so that the police can't see you? That's almost impressive if that's real.
That's very, very difficult. In the dark. Oh, gosh.
You would have to know those roads like the back of your hand and not die.
You really would. The idea that this is some outsider traveling around is starting to get a couple of chips in it here and there. It's not as shiny as it was.
Yeah, because like Christy and I live in Pennsylvania. And so this is mountains and all the roads are up and down and super windy. And I feel like I could drive like a crazy person on them because I know them like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. But if I took a road that I've never been on before, hell no, I'm going to wreck into a tree.
Yeah, because you don't know when the curves are coming. You don't know when to expect them. And even if there's signs, It's like, oh, sharp curve ahead. And you're like, oh, ha, ha, ha. No, you don't understand.
And in my younger years, when I was a little bit of a daredevil, I did actually drive on Christie's Road with my eyes shut to see if I could do it. And I could.
No.
Oh, I sure did. But that was, again, when I was younger and did not have a strong will to survive. But yeah, nobody could do that without knowing the roads. So like, I'm already sus with like, yeah, this guy just showed up from Indiana and did this stuff.
Yeah, that seems unlikely to me. And then it seems like the motorcyclist got as far as Fort Logan and then lost the police. And you would think that there would be some sort of a, issue of, we have a different report here between Carl Perry saying he fled on foot and the police saying, no, he fled on motorcycle. But it seems like the officers had perfectly resolved that. They said there was no conflict. They pointed out that he could have left the machine on Sheridan Boulevard in one of the many lanes that led from this boulevard, traveling on foot from the scene of his crime to the motorcycle. So that definitely makes it seem more thought out, at least from their point of view.
And that makes sense, because if you jumped on a running board and then made them go somewhere, you have to leave on foot to get back to where your shit is.
Yeah, if you, like, what happens to the motorcycle? You're going to be wandering around trying to find it. Like, you can't just jump from the motorcycle onto the running board. And then what? Is the motorcycle just going to chug along next to you, all, well behaved?
One-handed, like you're walking a bicycle? Yeah.
Very, very silly. So, yeah, it's definitely, they're like, nope, it could definitely be both. They searched the area. All they found was a small piece of cloth on a fence near the spot where the murders occurred. And, of course, a small piece of cloth. Well, that could be anything. That could be anybody's. We do get a description from Carl. Once again, we have a survivor, and so we have a witness. He says the holdup man was swarthy complexioned, collarless, and wore a striped silk shirt.
What the fuck does that even mean?
He was foreign.
Oh, okay.
And in my head, because he also gains a straw hat later, in my mind, he's definitely in Venice on a gondola.
Oh.
And rowing.
Oh, okay.
He's got the striped shirt and a straw hat, and he's swarthy. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I really think he just basically described a stereotypical gondola rower.
Did he have a red kerchief?
Yeah, right, exactly. I think questions need to be asked here. We need more questions about the wardrobe. It is a strange description, and the striped silk shirt. Silk is kind of a
How do you know it's silk? And also, what man wears silk shirts with straw hats? Also, how would you keep a straw hat on your head if you're on a motorcycle or hanging on the side of a car? None of this makes sense.
Well, there is, for some reason, later on, in this case, it pops up the idea of it being a woman dressed as a man.
Okay.
A woman dressed as a man might wear hat pins.
That would keep the hat on.
Yeah, we keep the hat on.
Why did she dress like a gondola driver?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The stripes hide my boobies. It's not flattering. It makes me look broader.
Yeah. So,
I love how, 3 people died and I'm over here just, critiquing fashion.
Well, but seriously, no, I read that description 6 times. And I still was like, I don't see anything but one thing. One very specific cultural touchstone thing. That's all I have.
I suppose the hat really does lend to gondola driver. Without the hat, I could have gone mime.
Yeah.
But No, with the hat, that's really, yeah. I didn't go there, but I'm there now.
Mm-hmm. Another piece of evidence we get is that they did find a footprint near the scene that suspected was, belonging to a person of interest. And so they had a plaster of Paris mold made of that. They did a post-mortem, of course, of all the bodies, and I think, as far as I'm aware, the only item of interest in that was that Marie McCormick's neck was broken, actually. Well, she had fallen out of the car. And so she was sitting on his lap, on Carl's lap, and she had kind of like rolled out of the car, it seems like, so she might have broken her neck
falling straight on her head.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially because I thought it was a headshot, so she was probably dead before they even, before she landed, I guess. That sounds callous, but, yeah, so it could just be the weird angle that she landed on because she didn't have a hand down or anything.
Yeah. There is a $1,250 reward being offered for information leading to the capture of the murderer. That's $88,000 received as compensation today. And $500 of that came from the manager of the tailoring store where the ladies worked.
Oh, that was very sweet.
Yes, very sweet. So on August 6th, the residents of Golden, Colorado, which is about a 15-minute drive today from Denver, are looking over their shoulders and locking their doors because someone found an abandoned motorcycle on the road around Graveyard Hill, of all places.
I love that you got the road name because the article I found is Road West of Here.
Oh, they missed that beautiful little detail.
They probably didn't want to. They're like, nope, not saying it.
I loved it. I was like, yeah, that is perfect.
Oh, that is perfect. But the AP was like, nope.
Oh, of course, yeah, the AP. Yeah. So it was reported Tuesday morning, and an officer brought it into the city that night. Now, it had no license plate, no headlight, and was covered in mud. The Colorado Transcript kind of had an interesting read on this. So the recent rains in the immediate vicinity of Golden would not cover any vehicle like the one in the police's possession. And I'm like, well, rain wouldn't cover it in mud. Like, I don't really understand. Rain would kind of, rinse it off. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily leave it shining and sparkling clean, but it wouldn't be described as muddy anymore.
Yeah, that's how I wash my car, is I just leave it out in the rain.
Exactly.
Yeah, covered in mud, that sentence makes me think that he did wreck and just got lucky that it was just into, a puddle of mud.
Yeah.
But also, if you notice, no headlight. So I'm thinking it never had a headlight.
Well, I mean, that's entirely possible. One account that I had from the chase did say that he dimmed the light once he seemed to realize that the police were behind him. But that could also be just a mistaken impression of somebody suddenly realizing, oh, he doesn't have a headlight, and thinking he had just turned it off.
Yeah.
When maybe he didn't have it to begin with.
Well, maybe he never had a license plate because, I just, crime tip, guys. If you're going to do crimes, you shouldn't leave your license plate attached anyway. Because they can track that. So if he was going out knowing that he was going to do a crime of some sort, any sort, really, then he would remove the plate long before he got on the road with it.
This has been Crime Tips with Amber.
I'm just saying.
Amber's views are not representative of old-timey crime. I don't know legal mumbo-jumbo. So,
I'm just saying it was premeditated in some sense of it if he's removing the plates before he leaves the house.
We don't know exactly how ubiquitous license plates were back then in 1925, especially for motorcycles. Okay, so just as an example, and I haven't looked into this, but I think I got this from Context Clues. I have recently been rewatching feel free to judge all you want. I don't care. Designing women. I should have told Amber that while she was drinking something.
Nope, I almost spit that on your microphone.
So, just move past it. We're moving past it.
It burns a little. It's in my nose.
So.
Oh, my.
I
don't know. I'm going to buy you a lovely bright blue purple pantsuit dress thing for your next birthday. Big ass can of Aquanet. All right, designing women. What do motorcycles and designing women have in common?
We were watching an episode, and it was like set in like 1991, 92, something like that. And they live in Georgia, in Atlanta. And in this episode, everybody was going to take their license test to get their licenses. All these adult, grown women, people who'd been driving this entire time on the show, were going to get their licenses. And I can only think, I haven't looked it up yet, but I can only think that that's when Georgia was like, okay, all right, it's time. Everybody's got to have a license to drive.
Georgia barely counts as being in the U.S.
I'm just saying.
They have their own thing there.
I can see that being possible, and I can see Colorado, like, I can see the lack of a license plate not being as indicative of premeditation as you think, because of the laws maybe not being as stringent back then.
Well, and that's totally fair, and Colorado was the first to legalize pot, right? So maybe they just like breaking some rules. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Sorry to any of our listeners in Georgia. I do not mean to offend, but y'all have your own laws down there that makes me scared to step foot in your state.
It's like a whole different place.
It is, and all their rules are different. I don't know the rules. If I don't know the rules, I don't want to go play the game. I don't want to go to jail. That's all I'm saying.
Again. So we've got all these motorcycle things, but there's also this guy. Now, I mentioned that guy on the bus from Englewood. There is this story that comes out about this guy. The bus driver said he had this real specific guy that he had dropped off around Federal Boulevard, around, a little after 10:30. And it's kind of tough because I don't think they can be the same. In my mind, it's really complicated and silly any possible way you find to make them be one and the same. So one of these clues, either motorcycle man or bus rider, has to be false.
Well, that's not surprising. They could both be false.
They could both be false, yeah. I'm just saying, they're probably not the same guy. So we have the inquest. Carl Perry is a witness. The ranchers who helped him out at the scene are witnesses. And the coroner's jury lands on robbery as a primary objective of the murder. And at the time, Perry agrees. They say that the bandit overlooked a purse containing $8, which Miss McCormick had hidden in her stocking. A lot of the accounts of the murders have them actually all kind of hiding their money when the bandit first comes to the car. And then the shooting then being out of anger when they said they had no money. So there's this idea that he didn't realize that she had this $8 in her stocking, $140 today. And another article does note that the pocketbooks contained a little bit of money, but they, quote, were not molested.
Okay.
And the bandit had left right after the shooting. Didn't even really try after all that.
Yeah, he didn't. It didn't seem like he searched anywhere.
Yeah, go to all the trouble of catching a car, jumping on the running board, shooting its occupants, and then don't even bother to try to find some money? What's the point?
I mean, at least take the car.
Well, you've got two bodies in there.
Well, I mean, you could roll them out.
You can roll them out, yeah. But if you're in a hurry, but they're not going to get much money from these people anyhow.
Yeah, like, so, and that's another thing. Like, these are basically teenagers, like young adults.
Mm-hmm.
We all know young adults are broke. You want to go for the old farts that have more money and put up less of a fight. Like, if your motive is money,
Mm-hmm.
this is not your crowd.
Yeah, the vast majority, I think pretty much all of our targets here have ended up being working class. Just working class people, because honestly, like, those are the kind of people who need to go off in a car down to a random lane somewhere where they can find some privacy. If they had more money, they'd be in a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they'd have their own apartments, you know? They wouldn't need to go off and find some secret place. They would be able to pay for it.
Yeah, like, if you're looking for money, you're not going to find it in the woods. What you will find is a gentleman that will pay you in chickens. So, like, the robbery thing just doesn't click in my head, because I'm like, if that's your goal...
It's just a really dumb target to choose.
Yeah.
Because you're automatically getting what some people, if they're looking at from just a financial perspective, would say are lower value.
Yeah.
You know, your targets go to the hotels.
Yeah.
Hold those people up.
Or a bar. I mean, just get better at pickpocketing.
Well, a bar is a little harder in 1925, but...
Well, yeah, yes and no.
If you can get into a speakeasy, so... But yeah, it's just, robbery just keeps on seeming, as we go along here, more and more unlikely to me. And it seems like each case we get, we find that the robbery angle just doesn't pay off, ever. They never get anything.
No, they never get anything. And, like, I feel like, too, it was, like, a mistake. Because he probably saw, like, a two-seater car. Or what he assumed was a two-seater car.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, only 2 people. I have 2 guns. This is fine. And then he gets on there. It's too late. And he's like, fuck. All right, give me all your money.
Which, speaking of the whole two-seater thing, just a real quick story about... I came across this story, and while I was finding all these Lover's Lane tales, and finding this one where it was a foursome out on the road, and, I just basically found that the most bare details I could, put it in the spreadsheet and moved on, because I didn't want to get bogged down on any one particular case. I wanted to just compile everything, and then start at the beginning, work our way through. So I really thought that we had something raunchy. Because I didn't know the details.
Oh, foursome. Ho, ho, ho.
Oh, I so thought that we had something raunchy. And so I got started researching it, and I was like, okay, there's going to be something behind all this whole, like, this will have been the front, the story, that they were being burglarized, and that the guy ran up to the car as they were driving, when really, it'll come out that they were, somewhere in the woods, and they were, on a Lover's Lane, and
Brown chicken, brown cow.
And no, that never happened. So, instead, I found all that in the last story. Fun times.
Oh, I did see one detail that we didn't go over, and that was Miss McCormick, Marie. Her clothes were disarranged and torn. Did you see that?
See, I hadn't really seen that anywhere.
There's one story, just one, that her clothes had been torn, and there was evidence that she might have been attacked after she was shot, but no money or jewelry was taken.
I trust that less, knowing that it was just from one source.
I do too.
Yeah. I kind of, especially with these particular cases, seeing how the information has changed as we've gone along, and we get, familiar with the original cases, the first cases, and then we see them get incorporated and discussed in later cases, and we start to see how, the information shifts and how this game of telephone has happened. Yeah, I just really want, like, all of my sources to, like, have backups for my sources.
No, I completely agree. And this was just in the paper. And this story completely differentiates from the other one. There's no motorcycle at all. This happens. It also has a part that Carl had lost consciousness for a short time before he got up and ran. And that there were bloodhounds involved that followed the killer's scent for 3/4 of a mile before they lost it. And there were footprints and tire prints where they lost the scent.
Footprints would make sense because they had that plaster cast.
But that was found somewhere else. That was found by a farmer, I thought.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought that was found closer to the scene. But that there was one story. Was that the story that compiled everything about, like, all different cases?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I feel like that was one of the ones that goes just completely off kilter.
It really does.
It has so many, like, weird details about all the other cases.
None of the other details matched up at all.
Like, that's the one where our wonderful Miss/Mrs. from last time had her engaged to her secret lover.
Yeah.
When she was actually truly already married to somebody else.
Yes. So it's not a reliable source by any means, but that story was completely different than the rest.
And interestingly, I think that might have been one of the first ones I saw, or the first one I saw when I first started looking at these, because that's one where I was like, okay, this is nice.
That's the one that was linking them all together.
Yeah, exactly. So, I wish it was more accurate. Now, the story comes out about this guy. I'm calling him the loafer. The loafer. Because there's this guy, George Schultz, all right, in Petersburg, Colorado, which I can't find on a map. I can sort of find something. I think what I suspect is that Petersburg was maybe an old suburb around Denver and got mostly swallowed up by other stuff. But anyhow, doesn't really matter that much. We're going to say close to Denver. So George Schultz has a filling station. He says there's this loafer who's been hanging out in Petersburg about a month or so. And everybody kind of noticed this guy for one main reason, and that's because he had that kind of personality. You know, the one where it's just one thing. His personality is one thing, and this guy's personality is guns.
Oh, yeah.
He was always armed. He was bragging about how he was a crack shot. Non-stop guns talk. That he could never talk about anything else. Never said his name, but did mention he was working in construction at the moment and had recently done some work on a ranch near Bennett, which is about 40 miles outside of Denver. So Schultz said the man had sold a revolver and a holster to a local in Petersburg, and then Schultz had purchased said revolver and holster. The loafer came back on Saturday in a Ford car and tried to buy them back. And Schultz would only resell him the holster. So there's this idea that maybe, the loafer, who didn't have any money before, all of a sudden comes back with a car and enough money to buy his stuff back.
Yeah, that wasn't this robbery, though.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he didn't get that money here.
Or that car.
Yeah.
Missed opportunities.
Yes. And so the police also, I forgot to mention, they also intend to talk to all the 25 people from that bus that came from Englewood. So nothing ever comes of any of these things. It's really kind of annoying. They do bring in some suspects. They bring in a William Eyre. He is 28. Carl Perry kind of IDs him. All right, so he says, look, the shooter was wearing a straw hat, so I need you to put a straw hat on Mr. Eyre. And so they put a straw hat on him, but then for some reason it goes further. And I think it's because it was fun for them, but this is what it says. Detectives Burns and Frillaberg returned to the Eyre residence and, with the permission of Eyre's wife and his mother-in-law, obtained his extra clothing. They then proceeded to dress the prisoner in various garments. It was after this procedure had been followed last night that Perry was reported to have positively identified Eyre as the slayer. So,
I'm a Barbie girl.
It's just very weird that they're like, no, we have to dress him up now. I mean, I guess whatever you can do to make him look, I don't know. It's a strange thing.
I want to see if this would still fly. Like, I kind of want to witness a crime and then just ask for ridiculous things in a lineup. Can you put them all in purple tube tops with red ball caps?
Well, they keep this guy in jail for like 3 days. And they spend all this time trying to find anything that corroborates Carl Perry's positive identification. And they're finding nothing. And so they have Carl Perry... Carl Perry's like, I need to hear his voice. And so Perry asks the captain of detectives, he's like, okay, tell him to talk to me in a high-pitched voice. I need him to shout 6 at me. And that's what he did. And then Perry said, nope, that is not the man. I never heard that voice before. And William Eyre is let go immediately.
Oh, my.
I don't understand any of that. I don't understand the 6 thing. I definitely don't get that.
6.
What is that? Why would he have said that? I can only assume that he's asking him to say 6 because that's something that the killer said.
Yeah.
But why would the killer have just said 6?
Unless it was part of a sentence, like you have 6 seconds and maybe there was something weird about the way he said it that would stand out. Like 6.
But why not have him say the whole sentence? It was very frustrating because I knew there had to be more to it. There had to be more.
Yeah, there's definitely more, but remember when Carl was like, I don't even remember all the things he said. He was saying such vile things and wouldn't give any examples. It has to be one of the things he said, and I bet that for some reason that word stuck to him, so there had to be maybe a weird inflection on it or some sort of accent when he said it that made it stand out to him, which is why he was like, make him say that one word.
Interesting.
Why he didn't tell the police why doesn't make any sense.
It's just so weird.
He had a lisp. You really hear it when he says 6.
He does try to identify people, just never has any success. There's always these little, like, people popping up. C. Rickenberg in mid-September was a neighbor of his. The mother of 3 children had said he'd confessed to her and that he was connected to the murders, and then I couldn't find anything about a Rickenberg anywhere else in the newspapers. The same thing happened with an illiterate farmhand called D.L. Pickens.
Oh, another farmhand.
Yep. He was 55, and he was drunkenly, as they admitted in the article, telling the police that he thought an ex-con that he used to know, who was now also a farmhand, had committed the murders. Apparently, his reasoning for this was the guy was, quote-unquote, slightly crippled. By the way, he had not seen the man in 5 years, and the last time he had seen him had been in Texas.
But also, if you are slightly disabled, you are not jumping on the running board of a moving vehicle.
There are, in some of the descriptions, he has a limp.
Oh, I didn't see any with a limp. How big of a grudge do you have that somebody you knew 5 years ago? And like, I bet it was that guy.
Right?
I bet it was him. I wonder what he did.
There is actually a farmhand who is suspected of some association with the murders, but not for another 2 years. That's an M.T. Prophet in December of 1927, and that actually is the plaster of Paris mold. They think they've matched that up with his footprint. But I'm just going to assume that they were incorrect because nothing ever came of pit.
You know what? I bet that's why I had the footprint with the farmhands.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Because it was empty profit. As soon as you said it, I'm like, yep, that's what it was.
There you go. So then it's quiet for a little while. And then almost 4 entire years later, the case is actually reopened because someone has stepped forward. And that is a Dorothy Jacobs. Now, she's 18 now. She was around 14 when the triple homicide happened. She was living at the Morrison Home for Girls and had gone out with another girl and 2 soldiers from Fort Logan. Apparently, we're just letting 14-year-olds go off with soldiers. Great. They were parked near Yale Avenue and South Federal Boulevard on the left side of the street, and they saw a little roadster drive to the corner, turn around and face them, then stop. It was on the right side of the street. They said that the lights, this is Dorothy saying this, the lights in the car she was in were dimmed, but she could get a pretty good view of the people in the roadster. She did not recognize them, but there was some conversation, some back and forth between the 2 cars. One of the soldiers said something to one of the men in the roadster a minute or 2 after the second car pulled up, and they had a very short conversation, but we don't know what the contents of that were. And then, quote, a short time later, they heard an argument, apparently between 2 men, the girl said in her statement. It was a few minutes later, she claims, when the shots were fired. She declares she then saw a man walk across the roadster and cut off across the field. Perry, the only surviving member of the party, wandered about 1.5 miles from the scene of the shooting to a drugstore and called police. So that's a really weird little story.
Yeah. And that doesn't really seem to line up with a lot, though.
Yeah, that is true. It does not. Dorothy says she and her group left the scene immediately after that and went home. They got home sometime around midnight. At least that's when you lose your... No, I'm not going to sing it. I'm not going to do it. So the police talked to the soldiers and her friend. They would not even admit to being in the car with her that night, much less witnessing anything.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Even Dorothy said that she'd only mentioned it to one person over the years, because her soldier friends had told her to keep mum or they'd be in hot water.
Were they not supposed to be out? Probably definitely not with minors.
Probably not with minors, maybe. So the police, they go ahead and they reopen the investigation, but they've got some side-eye for Dorothy's story. Now, nothing ever seemed to come of that, just like everything else. And I don't know what came of Dorothy. I don't know if she's the same one who ended up in Indianapolis in 1931, who is just about the right age. But there was a Dorothy Jacobs who just couldn't seem to get away from murders. So, Miss Dorothy Jacobs, 22, who is alleged to have slain her common-law husband, Robert Morrison, last August, was convicted today of involuntary manslaughter. She probably will be sentenced next Saturday. Morrison was stabbed with a butcher knife at an apartment where he had been living with Miss Jacobs. She pleaded self-defense. Like I said, Dorothy Jacobs, pretty common name. But, still in the Midwest-ish.
Could be.
Could be. Either way, girls named Dorothy Jacobs need to straighten up and fly right here. So, yeah, don't know what's going on there, but now, 5 years down, after everything has gone on, you have police saying the Denver murders were connected to these new murders happening in Queens. And this is where the connections start coming in. They say that in this case, They are calling him the sweetheart murderer now. We've got a different name.
That sounds too nice. That sounds too nice for a serial killer. The sweethearts. No, sweetheart doesn't belong with murderer.
It sounds way too cute. Way too cute. And they get some things wrong. This is an AP article. They say that they mutilated the faces of his woman victims. We have not seen any mutilation, I don't believe.
No, not really.
Not really. Spoke in a high, squeaky voice. Shabbily dressed.
Well, silk shirt is not shabby by any means.
Not by any means. No. But they do, in this article, kind of connect it to the one that's ongoing in Queens at the time, which, I've said there is a possibility of a connection, and we'll get into that. I did bring up, I always get it confused, the man and woman's clothing, woman and man's clothing, because I so want it to be that one. They do in these articles say a man and woman's clothing. So that is coming down the line when we get to the Queen's killers. The Queen's killer.
The Queen killer.
Oh, that's going to be so hard to say.
Queen's killer.
So, but yeah, it's definitely... In this AP article, they're saying that in the 1930 case, they're looking for a man in woman's clothing. And then they think that the 1925 murderer was a woman dressed as a man. Quote, and psychologists suggested that the slayer might have been a woman deranged by disappointment in love. The killer spoke in a high, squeaky voice, was shabbily dressed, and killed only lovers.
Maybe it's just somebody that had their balls injured in some way that gave them the high voice.
I mean, it's just the voice thing definitely does seem to carry through a lot of the stories.
Yeah, that is the one thing that everything has in common.
So yeah, that's really, honestly, that's where we're at. We're kind of winding down on the 1925 murders. These are, I think, we've got one more really strongly connected case and a couple of iffy ones. And then one I kind of just want to tell because it's bonkers.
Yes.
It's absolutely wild. Like, I read 2 paragraphs of a news article and was getting an envelope and a pen and trying to write a family tree before I even, I was like, how are these people related? What the hell? How could he be his brother-in-law and her brother? What? It was very confusing.
It's like a West Virginia family reunion.
It is great. So yes, we're winding down on the 1925 stuff, and then we're going to work on, into the 1930s stuff. So introducing some of that 1930s stuff is definitely, it's going to start peeking in just because there's more tie-ins, I think, with these later cases. I don't know why.
No, reporting got a little better, probably.
Probably, and I think the narrative of the squeaky voice had really started to set in. Especially with the Denver case.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I did find that surprising because there was only 1 or 2 articles that I found that even mentioned the voice at all. And everything else just kind of glossed over it for some reason. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that's not an important detail.
Yeah, and the voice thing becomes so hugely important, if memory serves, in the 1930 articles. So it's really interesting to see how this works out.
Well, I mean, because whatever they were doing in 1925 was obviously not working.
Right. So I would love if the Denver papers from that year ever get uploaded, or if one of us makes it to Denver someday and can spend a day at the library to be able to actually research this case with the local papers, because I'm sure there's a lot of information that we missed out on by virtue of not really having anything local during the relevant time period.
Yeah, because the local stuff definitely would have more.
That is so frustrating, but it happens. Hopefully we won't run into that with future cases in this miniseries.
Huh.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. So, with that, that's our case, pretty much. I do believe. Do you have anything else, Amber? Did I miss anything?
I do not have anything else other than one other way that the murderer got away. Because sources vary wildly. So this one said that, again, with the bloodhounds, they were on the trail, and it led them to an interurban line, and they believe that he boarded an electric train. And I'm like, well, that was the first one that said train. But yeah, that's it. That was the only thing I had.
Yeah, that would connect with the stories from witnesses in the actually no, in another murder. Oh, and the one we did in the Tiny that we insisted was not related to these ones. Oops. Maybe I'll add this to that to this feed at some point.
Maybe.
At the end of all this, I'll do it as a little bonus episode.
There you go.
So, but yes, thank you, Amber. And welcome to the Patreon, J1987, Nicole Manger, and Mana.
Welcome.
Old-timey crimey advice that is not about doing crimes, because Amber already did that. So don't try to jump from a motorcycle onto a running board.
I don't know. That seemed like it worked out fine. Don't sit on somebody's lap because you become their human shield.
Ah, yes, that did sort of happen, didn't it?
Make the boy sit on your lap.
Do's and don'ts. Do come over to our Patreon. There we go.
Do use new friends as human shields.
And don't forget to set the parking brake. Bye.
Bye. Sources. 6.
6! No, it would be shouting in a high-pitched voice. It would be like, 6!
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Good job.
My sources are from Colorado historic newspapers, the Daily Journal, Aspen Daily Times, Oak Creek Times, the Daily Times. I'm begging you people to just name things different.
No.
The Englewood Herald, the Colorado Transcript from newspapers.com. Thank you, Chris Garcia. Fort Collins, Coloradoan, San Francisco Examiner, Albuquerque Journal, Fairbury Journal, Tapping the Sign, Salt Lake Telegram, and Ancestry.com.
All of mine is from newspapers.com. Thank you, Chris Garcia, a second time. The Kenosha News, Our Mountain Home, The Times, the Ardmore Daily Press, The Press Democrat, Kentucky Post and Times Star, Fort Collins Coloradoan, Logan Sport Pharaohs Tribune, Casper Star Tribune, Lincoln, Nebraska State Journal.
That was very, very, very Midwestern.
I was trying.
Check, check, check. This is the sound of my voice.
Check, check, check. This is the sound of my velociraptor.
Nope, not even trying it. But the recording thingy's mad at us.
It's like, what fucking noise was that?
We're always pissing it off.